Boom, stop. I'm David Tian, Ph.D. and in this video I answer the question, are you evolved to be happy? Welcome to Man Up, episode 198.
Masculinity for the intelligent man. I'm David Tian, Ph.D., and this is
Man Up! Hey, I'm David Tian, Ph.D., and for over the past 10 years I've been helping hundreds of thousands of people in over 87 countries attain success, happiness, and fulfillment in life and love. And welcome to Man Up, episode 198. Fulfillment is the name of the game. Well, by the way, I'm in Bali in Ubud. This beautiful infinity pool looking out over the gorge here. Beautiful. Sun is setting. All right, let's get into it. This is a question that has come up. It's sort of like a background question. So I'm going to address it because it's important, but it's not a particular question. It's a lot of different questions. It's lying behind a lot of those questions. So it's really important that guys who are trying to get better with women understand the limitations of evolutionary psychology. There are a lot of them. And the roots of the industry, of the PUA industry, not the industry that I'm in, but was in previously, had its roots in the science and evolutionary psychology, namely the work of David Buss and his cohort. And there's a lot to be said about that cohort, but one of the issues is you have not been evolved to find fulfillment. And another way to put it is, you're not evolved to be happy. You're evolved to survive and, more importantly, replicate. The selfish gene, Richard Dawkins, puts it very well, that your body is simply a carrier for your genes. Your genes' purpose is to replicate. And whatever it needs to do to keep your body alive in order to maximize replication opportunities, and then to ensure that the duplicates of you, your children, survive and can then also replicate and continue that process, is what your genes will be optimized to do for you. So along those lines, fulfillment is not part of that process. It's not necessary. And in fact, it could make you less motivated to fuck more, to maybe even to not replicate as much. And it's something that you have to understand, that if you fulfill the evolutionary drives, like you do the check marks through the evolutionary drives, like status, money, body, sex, food, all of those things will give you pleasure. So if you Google this, and I did, it was very disappointing seeing the Google results. A lot of stupid psychologists out there, especially evolutionary psychologists, very short-sighted. And part of the reason is, I mean, like, when was the last time you saw an evolutionary psychologist really killing it? Like, a lot of them, I know a lot of them who hang out with pickup artists and try to get in with them. Like, I know some of them, very prominent ones, who I've heard are trying to get opportunities to hang out with models, like old senior guys trying to hang out with models. Why? Because their entire subject of study is priming them to think that the end-all, be-all of life is whether you get ahead in evolution. Red in tooth and claw is another way of putting it, right? The Stephen Jay Gould. Evolution is based on killing. And so you kill your competitors, and you might even eat them, like in the animal kingdom, and you then go up the pyramid, and you survive, and you replicate. And then some like catastrophic thing happens, like the meteorite, and the dinosaurs die off, the cockroach is still around. But anyway, my point is this. Evolution, you have not been evolved for your well-being, your subjective happiness. As long as you don't define happiness as pleasure, and that was a big mistake a lot of evolutionary psychologists make. They've clearly not taken a moral philosophy class. This is, what is happiness? Eudaimonia, or whatever it is the subject of like moral philosophy for many millennia. And it's never, I don't think any self-respecting philosopher is really a true hedonist in that sense of like, there's nothing beyond just pleasure. Obviously there's fulfillment. There's something deeper than just pleasures. And that's a theme that's been running through a lot of different episodes. So hopefully you've gotten on board with that. You understand what I'm saying there. So you have not been evolved to be fulfilled. You have evolved to seek out opportunities to replicate, to have sex and produce more babies, to basically do lots of risky things in order to get more sexual opportunities. In fact, imagine this, from an evolutionary perspective, you'd be better off as a male from the evolutionary perspective of fucking 50 women, getting them all pregnant, popping out as many of them as you can, and then maybe let's say 30 of them survive. Okay, it's going to be in this day and age a lot more than that, but let's say 30 of them survive, and they then go and have, because they're going to be like, if you do that, they're probably going to be like really pissed off and like have lots of psychological issues, and they're going to become dark triad types and fuck around, and so they'll spread out more, right? So basically, you do all this until you fuck over some husband who finds you and takes a shotgun to your head and blows you apart. No problem. You're 30 years old, but let's say you inseminated 50 women, 30 of them survived. Now you have 30 kids. You've already won. Versus the guy who lived till he was 100 years old with a wife and kids and a nuclear family with his, 5 grandkids or whatever it is, and is super fulfilled and happy. He looks back in his old, long life thinking, wow, what a great life I had. I've experienced so much love and connection and growth, and I've left this legacy. I've contributed. This is amazing. But he only had 5 grandkids and, 3 kids of his own. And from an evolutionary perspective, that motherfucker lost. Evolution's stupid. If you are obeying the mandates of evolution, you will just have more survival and replication, yeah, but you won't have happiness, not in any meaningful sense. Will you have pleasure? Yes. Are we rewarded by pleasure? Or does evolution reward us for having more food and sex? Obviously. The pleasure is what keeps this organism going, looking for more and more pleasure. But the world has been confusing happiness and pleasure, and that's the problem. So the world can continue to do that. I don't give a fuck. But I don't want you, if you're watching this, I prefer, if you're watching this, if you're a fan of mine or you like the material at all, that you'll understand that there's a huge difference, a world of difference between pleasure and fulfillment. And there is also a world of difference between following evolutionary drives and finding fulfillment. C.S. Lewis put it well, happiness can only exist, or there can only be happiness if there is restraint. There has to be restraint, because if you're from an evolutionary perspective, you just go for it. Food, sex, status, killing. Take what you've, take the spoils of your of war or whatever, and just, it's a horrible existence. So here's another way to look at it. Again, Richard Dawkins, Selfish Gene. You are a carrier for your genes. I recently just watched the latest Aliens movie, Alien Covenant, and it reminded me of that metaphor. So they're basically like, our genes don't give a fuck about whether you are fulfilled, whether you are meditating on theta waves. Unless that is then going to contribute to you fucking more and having more babies, it doesn't give a fuck. The genes don't want you to meditate and be like a monk. They definitely don't want you to be like a real monk. All right, they want you to fuck and have babies and keep those babies alive so that they can fucking have more babies and you can spread out like the alien. That's obviously not a great analogy, but I want it to be graphic so you understand the impact of and the import of this. In the movie Aliens, right, the alien goes right into the human body, and Alien Covenant, they grew fast. Like I remember the first Aliens, it was like days while it was in there. But anyway, so you're suffering, and the alien really only cares about you as a host for it to grow, and then you burst out of your belly and it wants to then replicate. Okay, it's kind of graphic and it's obviously not that bad. I mean, the genes want you to be happy insofar, they want you to have pleasure, because then pleasure will make you crave more pleasure. And you have to, like, we've evolved the prefrontal cortex to plan long-term strategies, to do math and things like that. But it can also help us see that we don't have to be driven by these needs. We can trick our genes into feeling fulfilled. If you value fulfillment, if you just want to crave in materialism and superficiality, and you just want to have pleasure, 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 and then die, go ahead. By all means, you'll have one on the evolutionary scale. I don't give a fuck. But I pity you. Pity the fool. I pity you. And hopefully you'll see the light. You'll come to the light side and leave the dark side of evolution. But I don't know. It's up to you. But test it out. Test it out. I have tested it out myself. These pleasures are momentary by their very nature. Fulfillment is you have to work to be fulfilled. You don't just accidentally become fulfilled. You have to work at it. You can accidentally have a pleasure. And if you were blessed with certain types of genes of facial symmetry and whatever, the body, if you can learn charisma, and you can get more sexual opportunities, that is only going to be it's about as pleasurable now as from a more mature perspective as any other pleasure, as food, as like adventure tours or something like that. These are just momentary pleasures. They are good to have in life, definitely. You don't want to be it can contribute to a good life, but a good life is definitely a lot more than just pleasure. Evolution has evolved us to survive and replicate. That's it. It has not evolved us to be fulfilled. To be fulfilled, you have to work at it. You have to take actual conscious effort and steps to do what is actually unnatural. So getting therapy is actually to make you fulfilled. Doing therapy is something that is unnatural. If you let the natural course of events unfold, you're going to be miserable. Dude, that's where we've evolved to be. We have not evolved for 100 years of sustained fulfillment and growth and contribution. We have not even been evolved for that. You have to work at that. So there you go. I'm glad I got it under 10 minutes. David Tian signing out. And before I do so, join the private Facebook group. A lot of guys on the same journey, on the same path, recovering from the malaise of evolution. We have come this far through a process that is red in tooth and claw, of struggle, of challenge, of pain, of death and blood and feeding on our enemies. It's a deep thing. It's a very deep and interesting process. But if you don't want that to be your life, if you want to live a life that's not just about survival and replication, then you need to come above that. You can't just be blindly following your pleasures. For a lot of guys in their 20s, whatever. Just go and find all the pleasure you want in your 20s. Eventually, you will realize how empty it is. But it's sort of like telling a guy who's starving out in the desert that these donuts are not good for him. He's just going to gobble them down. And actually, at that moment, it's better than nothing. So if you're starving of all pleasure, some pleasure is definitely better than nothing. But anyway, hopefully you are not a starving man in the desert, metaphorically speaking, and you understand the advice I'm giving you here. You have not been evolved for fulfillment. You have to work at that. So I'll see you inside the Private Man on Facebook group. The sun has set, more or less, and I'm going to take off now. David Tian. I'll see you in the Private Man on Facebook group. Click the link. Join the group. Let's see if you can see the river. Say one final goodbye today from the villa. It's a beautiful villa. And I'm going to grab some dinner. Until then, David Tian signing out. Man up!